The Scourge mechanic in the latest League of Path of Exile is extremely profitable, if done correctly, but there is some complexity to deal with to ensure you're maximising those profits. In this one, I'm going to walk you through everything I've learned over the past 3 days of League, where I've been interacting with the new mechanic quite heavily. So much so in fact that it took me over 12 hours to get to maps. Hello Exile, you're watching Altek2k Gaming. This video will be packed with information, and for your convenience I've broken it up into multiple sections. However, to avoid missing any crucial information, I do suggest that you watch the video from start to finish on your first viewing. The sections are as follows: the basics, exposed to corruption, Crucible Cooking, Tainted Currency, and why at least one piece of it is broken as hell, bosses, the Crucible skill tree, Scourged Maps, and tactics and tips. Without further ado, here we go. The basics. To interact with the League, you will need to speak with the last to die on the coast. He's there the moment you walk out the door from town. He will ask you to insert a rusty crucible into your body, and being the trusting soul you are, you get straight to it. It's when he asks you to insert a two-handed axe in there as well that you draw the line. Oh wait, no, you did that too. Once you have the crucible installed, you will start to fill it with blood as you kill monsters. Once this bar on the top right of the screen gets over halfway up, you will have the ability to phase in and out of the Nightmare Realm. The fuller the bar, the longer you can spend in there. Unless you're running a Scourge map that automates the entry and exit to the Nightmare Realm, then you'll be able to enter or exit the Nightmare Realm using the V key. If you exit early without being ejected, you will retain any blood remaining in the Crucible. It should also be noted that if you die, you will retain any of the blood that was left at time of death. When you eject from the Nightmare Realm, no matter where you are in the map, you will go back to where you entered it. The rarity of mobs plays a big part in how much blood you will gain. A single pack of rares can fill the Crucible completely. A blue pack will normally get it halfway, and then with whites it will tick up slowly. You should think of the Nightmare Realm a bit like a copy of your map. It's basically got loads of mobs, pretty much the same number you'd have in your map anyway, and then there's a load of Scourge packs added to it. It also has its own independent fog of war, which we'll get to later in the tactics section. If you're able to run the Nightmare fast enough, you'll be able to clear both the main map and the Nightmare Realm completely. This means way more than double the number of mobs, and therefore the number of drops. However, the loot is not doubled, it's way more than that, and that's because of exposed to corruption, which we'll talk about in a little while. I would suggest that you get as fast a clear character as possible for this league, as it will maximise your profits quite substantially. When you enter the Nightmare, a new pack of mobs will be spawned at your entry point. Any mobs at the entry point, or the exit point for that matter, will be knocked back and stunned temporarily. This gives you but a few moments to catch your bearings so that you don't get one shot. You should use this time to your advantage and kill as many mobs as possible. So how profitable is the League? So far I've dropped 2 Exalted Orbs, which is the strongest League start I think I've had in a long time. Speaking of drops, anything that drops in the Nightmare Realm will appear in your normal map after the Nightmare finishes, so you do not need to pick it up while you're running. With regards to past League mechanics, you will not be able to start many of these once you're in Nightmare. However, they will continue if you start them and then start Nightmare. An exception to this is Breach, which you can start whilst within Nightmare. You should also note that Delirium synergizes extremely well with this, because the Nightmare Realm also spawns the little sacks that release the mobs. To this end, it's probably a good idea to get the Delirium Atlas passives from Valdo's Rest. Exposed to Corruption. This is a debuff and a buff combined. You gain stacks of it the longer you're in the Nightmare Realm. Note that it's cumulative, so if you leave the Nightmare Realm, it will remain on your character until you leave the map. If you re-enter Nightmare within the map, then it will continue from where it left off and continue ticking up. So what does each stack do to you? First, it causes monsters to deal 1% more damage with hits and ailments. It grants us 1% more quantity and rarity for drops from Scourged mobs. Any mob within the Nightmare is classed as Scourged. It also grants 0.5% more corruption absorbed by items in the Blood Crucible. Crucible Cooking, or corrupting items in a cool way. When your Crucible is fully upgraded, it will have 4 slots, 2 equipment slots and 2 Dream Furnaces. What are Dream Furnaces? These are map slots. If you Scourge a white item, as well as becoming Scourged and Corrupted, it will also have the same effect as being alchemied, so it will gain a load of random prefixes and suffixes. If you Scourge a rare or magic item, it will retain all of its prefixes and suffixes. Also note that gem colours and links are not disrupted by this process. However, there are some exceptions to this for both prefixes, suffixes and sockets if you have some of the powerful upgrades in the Crucible passive tree. The speed at which an item absorbs corruption and becomes scourged seems to be dependent on the item level. The higher the item level, the longer it takes. The item level also affects the maximum level of scourge that can be reached. A piece of equipment dropped in the early part of the act between eye level 1 and 44 may have 1 tier of scourge. You will not be able to upgrade it beyond this point. Items at eye level 45 to 67 can have 2 tiers of scourge, and item level 68 plus can have 3 tiers of scourge. I believe from the information currently available that maps can actually go up to 10 tiers, although I haven't proved this myself at this point. It is not possible to corrupt jewels or flasks at this point. Tainted Currency. The Nightmare Realm mobs have a chance to drop tainted crafting orbs and scourged items. Most of the currency orbs now have a tainted currency equivalent that is similar to what the untainted version does, but working on corrupted items instead. The words on some of these differ, and while I haven't tested them, it does appear that they work slightly differently. All the socket and item quality ones are there: fusings, jewelers, chromatics, whetstones, all that good stuff. There also appears to be a tainted exalted orb that reads like it can act like an annulment or an exalt, i.e. it will remove a mod or add a mod. One of these currencies is very, very broken. Which one is it? Tainted fusings. Tainted fusings allow you to randomly change the number of links between your sockets. But it appears to be a bit ridiculous in that I have 6-linked 2 items in this league, and I've never managed to do that in a league before. I've always bought them with just 12 fusings, actually 6 apiece, which is simply insane. I'm guessing that's because corrupted items have a higher base chance of dropping 6-linked. So because it's corrupted and you're able to change it, it's gaining that inherent bonus. Although I could be wrong there and it may be nerfed. Now at time of recording, tainted fusings were 5C a piece, so it should be very, very cheap to 6-link items. Bosses. Bosses have a chance to spawn in the Nightmare Realm and seem to be extremely rare. I've had 2 bosses so far. It's been the same one both times. They do look amazing. The quality on them is really, really good. When you kill them, they drop an absolute ton of stuff. Included in both of these was a unique and tainted currency, so I don't know if this is guaranteed or not, but so far so good. Whilst near a boss, it would appear that the timer that normally ejects you from Nightmare either pauses or slows down, as I appear to have plenty of time to kill both bosses without an issue and without being kicked out. The Crucible skill tree. This tree has its own corruption meter that increases while killing things in Nightmare. Once it's full, you'll get another passive to allocate. You start on the top row of the Crucible, and to unlock the next row requires 10 points spent. So for the second row to be unlocked, you need to gain 10 passives and assign them. For the third row, 20, and for the fourth row, 30, and on and on. It should be noted that if you screw up your blood passive tree, all is not lost. You can reset it. This will cost you 10 Val and 10 Regret Orbs by talking to the last to die. This is extremely expensive early on, but late game shouldn't be so bad at all. Okay, let's talk about some of the Crucible passive points now. The first row of passive points basically just increase the speed at which you gain corruption. This means that items corrupt faster. Each one gives you 5% per level, and so for the full 5 each, you can get 25% quicker corruption of items in the form of jewellery, armour and weapons. I suggest going jewellery first and then armour, as you only have one weapon, you have multiple armour and jewellery slots. The second row, the first item, gives you Blood Crucible can transform a unique item. This means that you can scourge unique items now. The second one, Trypophobia, is useless, don't get it. It basically gives you a chance to gain an extra socket, but there's no reason you would ever want to do this. Stitch Wounds, you want to get this to full. 15% chance for transforming to add a link to the largest group of linked sockets. Now it should be noted that this does not work as you'd expect. If you have a 6 socket for 2 link, you would expect it to gain a link between the 4 and the 2 to make a 6. This doesn't happen. What happens is the one between the 2 moves to the 4 to give a 5. So what you want to do is make sure you have a 5 link before you use this to try and get a 6 link. At full levels, you get a 15% chance to gain a 6 link, and you get 3 goes at that 15 chance for each level that you scourge the item to. On the next row, the first item is Golden Blood. This gives us a 20% chance when transforming an item to add an explicit modifier. This will be added to rare and uniques only, and it's effectively a free Exalt Slam, so I also took this one to 5. The next one is Anomalous Aura. This gives us 2% chance per level when transforming an item to gain a beneficial modifier 1 tier higher. So when you scourge into tier 2, there's a chance that your beneficial modifier will actually be a tier 3. Moving on now to Stabilizing Energy, this is basically the same as the other one but in reverse. So it acts on the lower one, giving it a chance to roll 1 level lower. So getting a tier 2, you could have a level 1 bad modifier and a level 3 good modifier. On the fourth row, Crushed Organs. This gives you +1 Crucible slot to store another 2-handed axe. Or jewellery, of course. You definitely want to pick this up. Warped Sluice. While in Scourge Maps, items absorb 1% more corruption for each time the map has been transformed. Now remember I said that maps could be transformed up to 10 times? That effectively means that you'll get 10% more absorption of items. It's like a 35% on items instead of 25 if you've got the top row. Fervent Dreams. Maps absorb 25% more corruption. You want to pick this and get it to maximum level, as you will want to be scourging as many maps as possible. On the last row now, Restless Nightmare. This is another furnace slot which gives you your second map slot. Strange Forces. 1% chance for transforming to grant an additional beneficial modifier. This means that at maximum level you have a 5% chance, when scourging an item, to gain a second beneficial modifier. So 2 good ones, 1 bad one. Intensifying Emulsion. 2% chance for transforming to raise the tier of an explicit modifier on equipment. What this does is basically, if you've got a tier 2 health roll for instance, you'll get between X and X extra life. This will take you up 1 level so you get even more. This is incredibly beneficial, and you can get up to 3 of them if you're extremely lucky, because you get a 10% chance when it's full. On the last row, I really do suggest you get absolutely everything to full. Currently, Scourge Maps are currency printing machines. They really have ridiculous returns. They're like normal maps, but they have a load of Scourge modifiers on them, which increase both the damage that monsters do, but also the reward you get. Now, without exception, every single one of the maps that I've scourged has had rare Scourge monsters drop X additional blah. In the case of this one, rare Scourge monsters drop 1 additional fossil. Now, what I've noticed so far that is each time I increase the Scourge level, what happens with this modifier is it actually just increments. So for the second tier, you gain 2 additional fossils, 3 additional fossils, etc. Now, so far I've never taken a map above 3, but if this does continue to the full 10, then that's a lot of currency. And I've got a second good modifier, which is monsters in Nightmare grant 15% more experience, which is always good. And then on the bad side, only shift into Nightmare on killing a rare or unique enemy. Now notice the wording here, it says only shift into Nightmare. That means when you kill a rare or unique, you'll enter Nightmare. This should also mean that if you press V, you can exit prematurely if you wish. Players have minus 60% chance to suppress spell damage while in Nightmare. This doesn't affect my character because I don't use spell suppression. And that's really the key to everything Scourge. You want to try and make sure that your bad modifiers don't affect your character so that effectively it's just all good. Of course, that's easier said than done. Now, because they are such printing machines, always make sure that you have maps pre-crafted in your inventory to swap in. And by pre-crafted, I mean fully qualityed, made rare, and corrupted to try and roll an 8 mod. This will make the maps really, really dangerous, but on the plus side, so much loot. What I'm currently experimenting with at the moment is having one slot that just rolls them to tier 1 so I can keep a steady supply, while another one rolls them to maximum level to see if I can get a really juicy one. And that's what you can do with items as well. Have one that just does junk that you've just picked up off the ground, and have another one that does your items that you really care about. Note that having the extra slot doesn't half the amount of corruption. Each item gains the same amount of corruption as it did before. Tactics and tips. Juice your maps as much as possible. The more mobs, the more times you can enter the Nightmare Realm. For example, Alva's side areas will fill your bar. That's 3 extra trips into Nightmare. Speaking of which, why do we do this to ourselves, constantly re-entering Nightmare? On linear maps, when you enter Nightmare, run back along the path you've already taken, grabbing only super rare items that drop. When it ends, you'll return to where you entered so you won't need to backtrack, unless of course something really expensive dropped that you didn't have time to pick up. If the map isn't linear, then you want to be able to retrace your steps. The best way to do this is to use the minimap, because as I mentioned earlier, both of them have independent fogs of war. You want to keep an eye on your blood crucible level. Once it becomes full, you want to enter the Nightmare Realm as quickly as possible to avoid wasting any blood. Keep an eye on your exposed to corruption stacks. The extra damage granted Scourge mobs can cause them to basically perma-stun you. For this reason, I'm actually going for stun immunity on my build, which I wasn't planning to do earlier. On my build, I can become perma-stunned from 160 stacks-ish onwards. Always have something cooking in the oven, even if it's white. You never know when you might cook something worth a fortune. I would say that jewellery is probably the most profitable thing out of all the equipment to cook. Save just enough blood in your blood meter to enter the Nightmare as you're fighting bosses. Why on earth would you want to do this? When you run out of flash charges, as you know, boss fights start to slow down because you lose some damage, you lose some defences. By hitting V, we can jump straight into Nightmare Realm, kill as many mobs as possible that spawn, regain our flash charges, and then press V again to exit. On Conquerors, you can normally save enough charges to enter twice. This makes it much more survivable. You now know everything about Scourge that I do. If you found this video useful, I really would appreciate it if you tickle the like button. I've left links to some of my other guides that you may find useful at the top left and right of the screen. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.